Made with spoken.
Crescent Chronicles 19, Possession with the Side of Invitation, by Franetta McMillian. Digital narration, performed by narrator's custom voice too. Morian Watts, Crescent region. Watts, Chester's voice bellowed through my phone. Where the hell are you? That was precisely not the question I wished to hear from my boss at 3 on a Friday afternoon, when I was looking forward to my first weekend off in over a month. I knew it could only mean more work when it had been a doozy of a day already, the kind where the Crescent, aka the land of restless ghosts, truly lived up to its name. The day had begun with the crack of dawn emergency call to banish a crap-fleeing poltergeist in 4th Zone West, then moved on to a dwarf demon in 3rd East, only to top that off with yet another poltergeist in 3rd Zone West. The spirits were restless, I was exhausted, and my bum leg was positively killing me. Of course Chester could have been calling about a simple house cleansing, but I could tell by the sheer volume of his voice that he probably wasn't. Watts, he thundered again. I know you fucking hear me. Where are you? At the 3rd Zone ferryport. Why? How fast can you get to Dome East? Dome East? I thought, confused. That's Baron territory, and Barons generally don't call ghost charmers. Especially ghost charmers from the outside. Not fast, I replied. It was a high mist, low visibility day, which meant the ferry was moving at a snail's pace. Well, ditch the ferry, go to the tunnels, and ask for Perry. He owes me a favor. Why? What's the hurry? Potential major haunting. Mucho credito, if you know what I mean. And they asked for you specifically. I didn't believe that last part. I just figured Chester was trying to butter me up so I wouldn't be too cranky about the forced overtime. But the truth was, I found the whole thing hard to believe. Like I said, no denizen of posh Dome East would be caught dead hiring an outsider ghost charmer unless it was an extreme emergency, and I sincerely doubted anyone in Dome East knew my name. Though I garnered a rep on the outside for being effective, I certainly wasn't the most famous haint chaser in the Crescent. Ha, I grunted. Huh, nothing, Chester shot back. But I can't go to the Dome today, I whined. I'm not prepared. I didn't bring a change of clothes. I'd have to go in fully geared up, and you know the client won't like that. Aren't you wearing your company has suit? Don't you have your company ID? Well, yeah. Well then, they'll just have to deal. Since when do domers just deal? Well, this woman sounded fairly panicked when she called dispatch. Who is this panicked client anyway? I asked. Miss Etta Flowers, Chester replied. Etta Flowers? I echoed in disbelief. The CEO of Flowers Energy? No way did one of the wealthiest barons in the Crescent call lowly Chester Paranormal distressed about a major haunting. Was my boss trying to pull an April Fool's prank in March? Yep, that's the one. Jesus, I swore in an undertone. So get your butt in gear, Watts. Time's a-wasting. We could both use the bank. Yes, sirree, boss. I disconnected, left the ferry station, limped to the tunnel entrance, and asked the clerk for Perry. Within minutes, a private shuttle arrived ready to whisk me to the Dome, on Chester's dime. It pays to know people, I guess. I arrived at the Flowers residence in just under an hour, as opposed to 3 hours if I had taken the ferry. And as I predicted, Miss Etta was none too pleased when I arrived on her doorstep in full gear. So you're Ms. Morian Watts, the best ghost charmer in the 10 zones? She sneered when she answered the door. That's right. She didn't even say hello. This Etta was one of the wealthiest and most powerful women in the world, and she looked the part. She was supermodel-level attractive, tall, fashionably thin, and as luminously pale as moon in the clear night sky. She wore an impeccably tailored midnight navy power suit with a cream blouse, and her searing ice blue eyes only seemed to amplify her obvious disgust with the dirty outside darkening her door. I instantly felt about 3 feet tall in her presence. Well, I don't know about all that, I replied, nervously shifting my weight and trying my best to smile. Somebody seems to think so. Your boss, Chester, recommended you. It was either you or some guy named Brian. Brian's my housemate, I said, although I'm not sure why. She certainly didn't care, and it wasn't her business anyway. Well, Chester should tell you not to wear your has suit into the Dome. I sincerely apologize, Miss Flowers, I said, bowing. Yep, I actually bowed like an idiot. But I didn't have any Dome calls on my docket this morning, so I didn't pack any street clothes, and Chester said you needed me here as soon as possible. She frowned. That's no excuse, she scolded. Always be prepared. Tend to your business. Only then did she finally open the door wide enough to let me inside. Follow me. I dutifully hung my head, crossed the threshold, and followed. She briskly led me through the foyer, then down a long hallway to a sitting room, with her 4-inch stilettos clicking like castanets all the way. Her home's interior was a lot less ostentatious and much more homey than I expected it to be. Nothing in the house was cheap, but neither was it gaudy. She was old money and had some taste. She led me to a high back chair in a corner far away from any windows, where my presence would be well hidden from potentially prying eyes. You may sit here. Then, just as my butt was about to hit the cushion, you did remember to go through decon, didn't you? A wave of anger flushed through me. What do you think I am, lady? An idiot? But I smiled as sweetly as I could and said, Of course, ma'am. I followed all safety protocols. And for the first time, Miss Etta's face softened from resting bitch. Would you like some tea? She asked. Sure, I replied, not because I really wanted tea, but because I hoped she'd leave the room and give me a few minutes to catch my breath. And that's precisely what she did. Miss Etta actually went to make the tea herself. I wondered about the lack of visible support staff, but I then realized she'd probably instructed them to lie low while I was there. That way no one would ever know she'd let a lowly haint chaser pollute her abode. Miss Etta's absence also allowed me to examine my surroundings. Like I said, the decor was surprisingly modest. The only vaguely opulent thing in the sitting room was the gray marble fireplace. Above the hearth hung a large portrait of Miss Etta's father, in a simple black metal gallery-style frame. The late Vincent Flowers was the founder of Flowers Energy, the company Miss Etta now owned and ran. The portrait was stunningly executed, not a boilerplate commission hat job at all. The artist had managed to capture some of Mr. Flowers' big boss energy on real canvas with genuine oil paints. I could only imagine how much that cost. I was still admiring the painting when Miss Etta returned with the tea, and she caught me looking. My sister Allison painted that, she explained. I think she was a junior in high school. Impressive, I said, and I wasn't just saying that to flatter Miss Etta. I decided the painting was just shy of being a masterpiece, especially for a teenage artist. She grabbed a coaster and placed a cup of tea on the small end table beside me. She continued. Allison and Dad were still speaking then. Of course, maybe they've reconciled now that they're both beyond the veil. Death is the great equalizer and pacifier. Your sister passed. Yes, although it's been a few years now. Perhaps you know her by her so-called outsider name, Nightflower? I nodded. Of course I'd heard of Nightflower. She was the fiery wisp of a woman who crisscrossed the continent and globe tagging artful graffiti and preaching revolution. A veritable legend in the Crescent and beyond. It had always been rumored Nightflower was an heiress who turned her back on the dome to save the world. But I hadn't imagined she'd renounce such a prominent family. I didn't know what to say. So sorry for your loss. I'm well over it, Miss Etta said dismissively, as she sat with her own cup of tea. It's not like we were close, but I'm glad her name came up, because I need you to read my niece, Alicia, Allison's daughter. Nightflower had a daughter? I suppose it was possible. Nightflower's passion for lovers rivaled her passion for revolution, but she didn't seem the motherly type. Yes, Miss Etta confirmed. I believe that's what finally killed her. Did your sister die in childbirth? I asked, even though that would have been a rare occurrence for a domer. No, she lived for a few months after Alicia was born. But she was never the same after the baby. She withdrew from the world and hardly left this house. She wasn't a proper mother to Alicia either. After the baby was born, Allison figured she'd done her part. She lost her will to live. That's sad, I remarked, praying I sounded properly mournful. Why do you need me to read Alicia? She has an environmental cancer. That's strange, I noted. And it was. Extremely so. Environmental cancers were almost unheard of in domers. Perfectly programmed environments don't tend to lead to cancer. Has Alicia spent any significant time outside? No, she hasn't. In fact, she's never been outside in her life. Miss Etta said that last sentence like it was something to be proud of. Now, I was even more perplexed. Was she born with it? Miss Etta paused to take a sip of tea. No, Alicia was surprisingly healthy at birth, especially considering the shape her mother Nightflower was in. Did your sister have an environmental cancer? Miss Etta gave a derisive snort. Allison was an environmental cancer. Whoa. Clearly no love lost there. Time to reapproach. Was your sister being treated for cancer during her pregnancy? No, Miss Etta replied. Now I'm confused, I finally said aloud. She elaborated. Actually, I can't be sure. I mean, it was obvious Allison wasn't healthy when she dragged her butt back in here, but she also steadfastly refused treatment, so we never got a definitive diagnosis. It was almost as if Allison enjoyed being ill. Somehow I sincerely doubted that. Nobody enjoys being sick. Does your niece have any other symptoms? I asked. Because I hardly think you'd call a ghost charmer just to wreak cancer. That's something a regular doctor could do. Ms. Etta blushed and briefly lowered her eyes. Sometimes Alicia has disturbing dreams, she mumbled. Like what? Ms. Etta suddenly stood and adjusted her jacket, which of course fit her perfectly and didn't need adjusting. I'll go fetch her. She can explain. Wait, I said. Before you go, can I ask you a few more questions? She put her hands on her hips. What? She huffed. How old is Alicia? I asked. 7, replied Miss Etta. Has she ever been read before? No. Have you? Allison would sometimes try to read me, but I'd always make her stop. Did you explain to your niece what it feels like to be read? I asked. Because it can be intense. Sometimes too intense for a child her age. Alicia's a strong spirit, insisted Miss Etta. She can take it. Still, I insisted right back. I'll need to ask her permission to be read. Miss Etta raised one perfectly arched, pale blonde eyebrow. Why? I'm her legal guardian, and I've already given you my permission. But they're Alicia's dreams inside her head. And depending on how deep or strange those dreams are, the reading could potentially be traumatic. You sound like you want to hurt her. No, ma'am, I said. Precisely the opposite. I just want to be safe. Well, said Miss Etta wearily, I just want Alicia to be well. Miss Flowers, I assure you, we both want the same thing. And with one last piercing glare, Miss Etta was on her way. While she was gone, I tried to scare up some energy and center myself. Frankly, I hoped the reading would yield a big goose egg. Then I could just take the credits and run straight to my bed. I was exhausted. I'd had more than my share of fireworks for the day. Alicia came in looking like your typical cancer kid. She was frightfully thin and chalky pale. What little downy hair she had on her head was whiter than snow. Her eyes were her most haunting feature. They were blue, similar to Miss Etta's, but definitely not the same. In fact, I'd never seen eyes that color on a human being. They were an electric, almost neon blue, and deeper than the ocean. Miss Etta had told me Alicia was 7, but Alicia's eyes weren't the eyes of a child. They'd seen far too much. Was that because she had to fight for her life at such a young age? Or did her dreams have something to do with it? Alicia possessed the sort of confidence you have when you know your family owns a significant part of the planet. She strode right up to me and introduced herself. I'm Alicia. Who are you? My name's Morian, I said. She offered me her hand, as pale and fine as porcelain. I took it in my own. It felt like it was barely there, like I was holding hands with the wind. What kind of doctor are you? She asked, clearly fascinated with the zippers and buckles on my has-suit. I'm not a doctor. I'm a ghost charmer, I replied. Your Aunt Etta tells me you've been having weird dreams. I might be able to help with that. Alicia lowered her eyes, and I have to admit, I was thankful. That 1,000-year stare of hers gave me chills. Yeah, she mumbled, suddenly bashful. They're bad. Things happen in them I don't understand. Alicia, may I see your dreams? She furrowed her brow, then laughed as if I'd suggested the stupidest thing in the world. How can you do that? I'm not asleep, and you can't see inside my head. I gave her a wink. Yes, I can. I've got superpowers. She giggled. You don't look like a superhero. You're too short. Ouch. Out of the mouths of babes. I thought to her, may I hold both your hands, please? She giggled. Your words dance inside my head, and they tickle. May I hold both your hands? I thought again. That feels so strange, she said. How do you do that? How do you throw words in my head? Truthfully? I thought to her. I'm not really sure. Shyly, she let me hold her other hand. Now, will you breathe with me? I asked, while slowing my own breathing to a more deliberate pace. That's all you have to do right now. Just breathe. It took a beat for her to settle down, but eventually she followed my breath and we fell into a rhythm. At first, I felt nothing unexpected. There was the sickness, the drugs, and a fatigue. I'd read dozens of cancer patients before and sensed similar things. Alicia was seriously ill, but she was a fighter. It might take some time, but she would beat this thing. The purely physical part of it anyway. Now I'm going to go a little deeper, I warned. Tell me if you feel any pain or you get scared. Okay? You don't have to say it out loud. You can just think it. I can hear you. Okay, she thought. Then she said it out loud to be certain I'd heard. Okay. Okay, I thought back. Think about your last weird dream. There was a sharp pang of fear, and for an instant, I thought I'd lose her. But soon she steeled herself and started thinking. At first, I saw nothing. I just had the sensation of being submerged in water. The water was warm, like someone had drawn a bath. Yet the water was far deeper than what you'd find in a bathtub. Yet, I didn't get the impression I was in a lake or the ocean. Gradually, I got a clear view of my surroundings. The water was in a pool, probably one of those extra deep pools they use to train divers. This pool was housed in a cavernous room with steel gray walls lit by candlelight. There were a number of people around the pool, chanting and clapping with the force of a spell. I was floating, and my body was on fire, with fever, with want. I become aware of someone in the pool with me, a man, the man that I love. I have loved him since the moment we first met. He has wandered far and normally belongs to someone else, but tonight he is mine, and in this time of power, we will finally complete our great work. Suddenly, I heard a voice in my head, most definitely not Alicia's, but someone, or was it something, welling up from the depths of her soul. It spoke to me in a raspy whisper. This is how I was conceived, a manifestation of sacred love finally requited, a child of the moon and stars, a child to bring justice to this sick world. And that's when I started to lose the vision, and Alicia began to panic. I felt her raw terror like a physical blow. She yanked her hands from mine and started screaming. I had to break the link. I quickly banished the last traces of the vision and pulled her quaking body close to mine. Alicia, honey, it's okay. I cooed aloud. It was just a bad dream. We're out of it now. Alicia said nothing, at least in words. She whimpered and squirmed as if my touch pained her, yet she didn't seem to want to escape my embrace. So I held on as gently as I could, while assuring her she was safe and that I would protect her. Honestly, I never thought the child would stop trembling, but eventually she did. As you can imagine, Miss Etta was horrified. What did you do to her? She angrily demanded. I asked to see one of her dreams and she showed me, I replied, as calmly as I could. Well, you should be ashamed, Miss Etta screamed. She's quaking like she's seen Satan himself. And as much as I hate to admit it, in a way, Miss Etta was right. Reading children is often unpredictable. I should have taken more time. I should have tread 1,000 times more lightly than I did. But I was at the ass end of a long day, and I just wanted to be done. Eventually, Alicia found her words. Who was that other lady, Miss Morian? That other lady inside my head? She talks to me all the time. I don't know. I'm going to try and find out. Now Mrs. Etta was hysterical. What other lady? I didn't have an answer for her right then. I'd have to do a deeper reading to find out. And I seriously didn't think Miss Etta was going to let that happen. So I just sat there with my mouth hanging open. That's when Miss Etta wrested Alicia from my arms and marched her back to her room. When she returned, she was still livid. I hope you don't expect to get paid for torturing my niece. I only shrugged. Chester wasn't going to be happy, but it served him right for being greedy. If he didn't like it, he could fire me. I grabbed my headgear from the floor. Do you want me to leave? I asked. No, Miss Etta snapped. Not until you tell me about this other woman. I was almost too scared to answer. I'd caused a whole mess of drama only to say, I don't know. Well, what can you tell me? Your niece is being haunted. And if you aren't careful, she may wind up possessed. Maybe I should have been gentler with my diagnosis, but neither of us were in a mood to play. That was the last straw. Miss Etta threw me out of the house. I sincerely never thought I'd hear from her again. I trudged to the ferry port, ignoring all the sideways glances I got for wearing full gear inside the dome, fully expecting to be unemployed by the time I got home. But by some small miracle, I kept my job. And by a major one, Miss Etta contacted me. 2 weeks after she unceremoniously threw me out of her house, she sent me an email with the subject line, Tar Pit Wall, 5 a.m. tomorrow. Christ, that was early. I clicked it open. Miss Watts, I'm still angry, but I need your help. Alicia is worse. Meet me tomorrow if you're interested. E.F. I wondered how she got my email address, especially when Chester was rightfully paranoid about giving out personal contact information. But then I remembered she was a baron and could do things us mere mortals couldn't. At any rate, her email address was a black box, on a private network, and virtually unhackable. Any secret she had was safe. I replied immediately, I'll be there, M.W. And that's how I found myself up before the butt crack of dawn standing in the armpit of the Crescent. The Tar Pits was a super fun site at the edge of Upper 9 West, U9 West for short. It was the furthest area outside the dome that was still considered suitable for human habitation. Barely. Mind you, the area was still toxic as hell, rated D5. That meant don't even think of wandering outside your hovel without a hazsuit, and even then, don't stay out too long. Except some people in U9 West didn't even have hovels, which meant they camped out around the tar pit wall in their cheap patched hazsuits all year long. The ambience around the wall could range from terrifying to festive. Lots of artists lived in U9 West, and when the mist was light, they sold their wares and played their music into the wee hours of the morning. But criminals and radicals also clustered in the area, which meant at times things could get tense. Either way, you took your chances. It was extraordinary Miss Etta Flowers would deign to meet me there. She picked a good time, though. The mist was light. The air was cool. The wall was relatively deserted, and the few people around were sleeping. Miss Etta rolled up in a sleek silver shuttle, wearing a matching high-end silver hazsuit. The passenger side door spread open like a metal wing. Get in, she said, her voice lowered by a modulator. I did. Then she surprised me again by heading towards the 10th zone. Officially, no one lived in the 10th zone. It was toxic, and to those sensitive enough to care, haunted as hell. I'm surprised to hear from you, I said. Our last meeting didn't end well. At first she said nothing, being preoccupied with navigation. Finally she came to a stop, looked up from the controls and announced, You can remove your headgear. Air filters are active. I did, and took a deep breath. The air in the shuttle was fresher than that in the dome. You said you needed my help? Yes, she replied. I did. There were some things I couldn't tell you the last time. I needed to know if you were legit. There are plenty of posers in the Crescent. I'm not a poser, I assured her. Though at times I wish I were. Miss Etta fully cut the engine, flipped on the inside lights, and morphed the windows to opaque. Other than our breathing, the silence was so total, it felt like all the sound in the world had been surgically removed. We were parked in the middle of nowhere, on one of the most toxic patches of land on Earth. I asked Miss Etta, You aren't planning on killing me, are you? I was only half joking. Out here, no one would hear me scream. No, she replied. I just have some sensitive information to discuss and I don't want to risk being overheard. I don't know why she thought she had anything to fear. The shuttle was totally soundproof. I took a deep breath. Okay then, what is it? In your email, you mentioned Alicia had taken a turn for the worse. At first, she said nothing. Then, those ice blue eyes of hers filled with tears. She reached into a compartment just underneath the dashboard, pulled out a piece of paper, and handed it to me. This wasn't just any random scrap of paper. It looked like professional quality watercolor paper, which was extraordinary in itself. Hardly anyone had the credits for that stuff anymore. But the drawing on the paper was even more astounding. It was a very realistic sketch of Miss Etta looking in her bathroom mirror, perhaps getting ready for bed. I recognized the style. It was the same as her late sister Allison's, the same as the portrait of her father which hung in her sitting room. Underneath the drawing was written, Sister Etta, I see you. Who drew this? I asked, even though I already suspected the answer. Alicia did. Has she ever drawn like this before? No, she drew like a typical 7-year-old because that's who she is. At least that's how she drew until a few days ago. I stared at the drawing. Though it was done quickly, it was almost as stunning as the portrait which hung in Miss Etta's sitting room. Did you actually see Alicia do this? Yes. First I saw her rip some pages out of one of Allison's old sketchbooks. I thought nothing of it at the time. It's not as if my sister's sketchbooks are sacred to me. Plus, the past 18 months have been very difficult for Alicia. Treatments and all. If scribbling on some paper would bring her some joy, who am I to deny it? Silence. I immediately thought, Could Nightflower be using her own daughter to speak from beyond the veil? Was she the one making her ill? Miss Etta and I stared at the drawing together. Then Miss Etta asked, "What exactly did you see when you read my niece?" I shut my eyes and tried to ease back into the vision. The visuals had been murky, as they always are when you're reading someone else's dreams. Mostly I remembered impressions: the warm water, the fever, a passion, and the creepy voice that said, "This is how I was born." I could understand why the dream frightened Alicia. 7-year-olds know nothing of sex rituals. But had Alicia been the product of one? "I saw a sex ritual," I replied. "Figures," grumbled Miss Etta. "Allison was into all sorts of crazy shit. When she was younger, she did it just to piss our father off. But when she got older, who knows what she was trying to prove." "Was Allison, as you say, a poser?" "No," Miss Etta stated flatly. "No, she was emphatically not. She was quite gifted in that way, like our mother, and because of that, our father was always frightened for her." "What happened to your mother, anyway?" I asked. Lord knows there had been plenty of speculation as to what had become of the mysterious Vera Flowers. In the early years of their marriage, she had been the willowy, though silent, presence at Vincent's side. Then suddenly, she vanished. Rumors flew. She was ill. She'd run off and left him. He had her locked in a basement. My father sent her to an institution. The sight overwhelmed her. Do you think that's what happened to Allison? Truthfully, no. Allison had a much stronger will. Mother's was as fragile as rice paper. In my vision, I got the sense of a man. Any idea who he might be? Miss Etta shrugged. Who the hell knows? Allison had more lovers than the law allowed. She had a thing for outsider bad boys. The deeper the zone, the more attractive they were. Any lovers with the sight? Miss Etta folded her arms. Yeah, Papa Z. Damn, Papa Z. He had the sight all right. Papa Z was a Hungan who hailed from U9 West, not too far from where the shuttle was parked. He had a rep for giving searingly accurate readings. If you asked Papa Z to read your future, and he said something was going to happen, 9.9 times out of 10, it did. He was also the go-to man for curses, love potions, and folk cures, as he excelled in those areas too. Papa Z also delighted in being a thorn in Chester's side. Sometimes he'd conjure shit for the hell of it, just to see if someone on Chester's team could put it down. I'd encountered a piece of his handiwork once. Some obscure swamp demon who had an appetite for dog souls. To this day, I'm not sure how I banished it, but the dog lovers of Set Zone West all breathed a sigh of relief when it was gone. Another thing about Papa Z, he was a bit of a Casanova, and he was equal opportunity. Men, women, in between, he didn't care. He could take his pick. And if you caught a glimpse of him in a club, you could understand why. Our office manager, Claire, had christened him the most beautifulest man-thing in the 10 zones, and I was inclined to agree. He was a tall, lean, elegant man with flawless maca-brown skin and arresting light brown, almost amber eyes, who owned an extensive wardrobe of skin-tight, fashion-forward, high-end Haas suits. Even though I didn't have a chance in hell with him, I never missed a chance to appreciate the scenery if he was around. Nightflower might have loved the bad boys, but she also had good taste. "Do you know him?" asked Miss Etta. "I know of him, and I had to clean up one of his messes once," I replied. "He's definitely not a poser. He also wasn't Alicia's father. Of that I was certain. Alicia would have a little more color if he was, but maybe he'd planned the ritual." That's when Miss Etta reached into one of the many pockets on her Haas suit and handed me a flash drive. "I want you to get to the bottom of this," she said. "Off book. You'll be working directly for me." I stared at the drive for a while, wondering how many untraceables it might contain. Hard to believe, after all that drama, Miss Etta was hiring me to be her personal psychic detective. Wonders never cease. My sister's pulled some crazy shit before, but this is a child we're talking about. Find out what Allison did and make it stop. After Miss Etta dropped that bomb, I had her drop me off at the 6 Zone library so I could walk to work. Yep, after all that, I still had a full day ahead of me. Fortunately, it was an on-site, catch-up on paperwork day, and I had no calls scheduled in the field. But as soon as I got on the floor, I could tell something was up. I waved good morning, and instantly everyone got real quiet. Every eye in the place was either staring me down or actively avoiding my gaze. I whispered to Claire, "What the hell is going on?" "Morian girl, I think you in trouble," she whispered back. "Why?" "A courier just dropped off a gleaming silver envelope. Actually, a courier with the silver envelope wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It just meant someone wanted to get a message to you, and that message was super important, too important to risk sending by email. Now, granted, most of the time that urgent message was, "You have been served." But occasionally, people also received premium job offers and marriage proposals that way. I wasn't dating anyone, and I hadn't been looking for work, so that only left the possibility of getting sued, which might mean Chester Paranormal was getting sued as well. Oh boy. I threw my backpack under my desk, sat down, and logged on to my workstation expecting the worst. Sure enough, at the top of my intra-office messages was a triple-starred one from Chester. "Watts, get your butt in my office, now." So I got up and started walking towards the elevator. As I made my way, I could hear someone whistling the funeral march in the background. My boss, Chester, was quite the character. He wasn't always a psychic entrepreneur. Believe it or not, he began his working life as a professional cage fighter. He remained undefeated throughout his long career and was somewhat of a Crescent legend. In addition to his lightning-quick reflexes, martial arts expertise, and grit, he used his formidable sightly gifts to psych out his opponents. It's hard to keep someone in a headlock when that someone keeps randomly tossing thoughts in your head. "How is that even legal?" I asked my housemate Brian when he first told me. Brian only shrugged. "There's a lot of people who don't believe the sight is real, and sometimes that works to our advantage." Anyway, after the years in the octagon had taken their toll, Chester had to find something else to do with his life, and he didn't want that something else to be boring. He noticed the Crescent was getting more haunted by the day. It seems the more toxic the outside got, and the more the natural environment crumbled, the more the spirits came out to play. The veil between worlds was fraying. At first, intrusions from the beyond were subtle. For instance, say a new tenant moves into an apartment that hadn't been properly cleansed beforehand. The new digs seem fine at first. Then suddenly, our unfortunate renter finds themselves being randomly assaulted by the astral funk of former residents. They start experiencing inexplicable cold spots, or hearing odd noises, or smelling strange odors. Eventually, the situation becomes so intolerable that our unlucky renter might feel compelled to hire a priest or a hongan to sage and bless the place just so they could get a proper night's sleep. But things in the Crescent eventually got worse than that. Like, when your kid whined about something being under the bed, often there was something actually there. Chester observed this trend and immediately saw it as an opportunity to make some bank. Until Chester's Paranormal came on the scene, most supernatural intrusions were handled by a loose network of priests, voodoo practitioners, self-proclaimed witches, etc. Some of these folks were genuine. Some were thirsty wannabes who honestly thought they were genuine, while others were posers and outright grifters. Chester figured if he could assemble a team of highly gifted people with the sight, he could provide the Crescent with crack paranormal services, and no one would ever have to be haunted against their will ever again. At first, folks just laughed at him. After all, that was an awfully odd trajectory. From cage fighter to haint chaser? But in just a few years, Chester managed to turn his crazy notion into a thriving business. He amassed enough credits to afford a small house in First Zone West, which was the closest you could get to the dome without actually living in it. He also owned a private shuttle, along with the tunnel pass, which meant he never had to walk or take the ferry into work. It was my housemate Brian who convinced Chester to interview me. After my place in Gulf Shores got flattened by Hurricane Callie, Brian, my college friend and former intramural dance team partner, invited me to the Crescent to move in with him. He just inherited a house in 4th Zone West from his aunt, and he needed someone to share expenses so he wouldn't lose it. It had recently been fortified and outfitted with a new top-of-the-line decon chamber, and was one of the few houses left standing and structurally sound after the storm hit. Seeing as I was basically homeless at the time, I quickly took Brian up on his generous offer. Chester granted me the interview because Brian was the top ghost charmer at the agency. Brian came into his power when he was 10 and was strong as hell. He was one of the first people I met who claimed to have the gift, and he used to freak people out by mentally bending silverware and warping dishes in the campus dining hall. People were also freaked out by his looks. Brian was a loud and proud gay albino, with unnerving pinkish gray eyes and a theatrical fashion sense. Brian also had absolutely no sense of fear, and there were some months when his work accounted for as much as half of Chester Paranormal's revenue. He was the first, and for a while, the only old friend I told about my newly acquired sightly gifts after I woke up from a coma in a Liberty City hospital. And he, along with my mentor Father Anthony, was the one who convinced me that ghost charming was, if not exactly a noble profession, at least a decent and interesting way to support myself. My interview was, let's say, unconventional. First of all, Chester did not look like the stereotypical psychic. With his broad shoulders, scarred square jaw, military buzz cut, and well-defined muscles, he more resembled a drill sergeant from hell. He spoke like one, too. His voice only had one volume setting, and that was booming. On the day of the interview, I meekly walked into his office wearing a patched has suit that had definitely seen better days. He stood to his full 6-foot-plus height and thundered, "Miss Morian Watts, hold out both your arms, hands, palms up." I immediately dropped my backpack on the floor and did as I was told. "Okay," Chester announced. "I'm going to read you. When I get too deep, I want you to kick me out as hard as you can. You got that? Spare me nothing." "Okay," I whimpered. He locked eyes, clasped my shaking arms just beneath the elbow, and began to read me. His presence felt like a bowl stampeding through my skull. Definitely not subtle. I let him poke around a while, and then I ejected him like Father Anthony had taught me. I went harder than I intended, probably because I was a bundle of nerves. Chester winced and grabbed his temples. "Damn, girl, Brian wasn't kidding. You as strong as fuck." He went and took a seat behind his desk and motioned to me to sit in the extra chair that was facing him. "Okay, Ms. Watts," he said, "tell me a little bit about yourself." I told him about how I came into my power after a lengthy illness and a coma. I told him how I was mentored by Father Anthony Wills, a Knights of the New Star priest. Apparently, he'd heard of Father Anthony. You know he's Bishop of Greater Houston now. I nodded. "Yeah, I know. I had the pleasure of meeting him once. Formidable gift, strong character." "I count him as a friend," I said. "He's a friend from a high place," Chester mused. He then asked about my experience. I told him the things I thought he wanted to hear. I could do anything from simple house cleansings to reading illness by touch to doing send-offs to help escort the terminally ill into the world beyond. Chester asked, "What's the most difficult thing you've ever done?" "I assisted with an exorcism once," I replied. "Was this with Father Anthony?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "Could you give me details?" "Only limited ones. The client made me sign an NDA." He frowned. "Could you at least give me hints?" "A young girl was possessed by dozens of hungry ghosts. I banished them, and I have the scars to prove it." I unzipped the left arm of my has suit and showed him the thick, dark scar that ran almost the entire length of my forearm. For the first time, he cracked a smile. "Damn, girl, I'm impressed." That's when he told me I was hired. There was a 90-day training and probationary period where I'd go on calls with a partner. And after that, if my partner said I was ready, I could go out on my own. He thought to me my starting salary. It was far higher than I expected, and I thanked him profusely, maybe a little too profusely. We shook hands. He said I was dismissed. I re-zipped the arm of my suit, then retrieved my backpack from the floor. Then, just as I was about to leave, Chester asked, "Watts, is that the only has suit you own?" "It's one of two, and the second one's in even worse shape." He blew a raspberry and shook his head. "Watts, Watts, Watts," he sighed. "This is the Crescent. You're gonna need something better than that. Take the elevator down to the supply room and tell Daniel I sent you. I'm sure we can hook you up with something better." I objected, but beyond rent, I've barely got a credit to my name. The storm and my mother's last medical bills took nearly everything from me. "Don't fret, Watts," he thought to me. "It's a gift." I was stunned. The gruff ex-cage fighter had a soft side. I prayed that would be the side he would show when I went to his office to discuss the courier's envelope. Chester immediately morphed his windows and switched on the white noise as I entered his office. That wasn't a reassuring sign. He didn't even do all that before my interview. "Watts," he suddenly announced, "I'm going to ask you one question, and I want you to tell me the truth." I shakily nodded my assent, but really, I didn't have a choice. "Are you planning on leaving us for Ruby Biotech?" Definitely not the question I expected. I'm not sure if it was nerves or the absolute absurdity of the query, but I just burst out laughing. Chester wasn't amused. "What's so damn funny?" he snapped. "That's simply the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. What would Ruby Biotech even want with the likes of me? I don't have a stem bone in my body. In college, I only passed intro to biology by the hair of my chinny chin-chin. Why, Ruby Biotech even rejected my math genius sister. Well, obviously they want something, Chester counted. 'Cause they've been sniffing around here for the past week or so, asking for references and whatnot. I stared at him like he'd grown an extra head. Why? I don't know, but I think the answer might be in that envelope. He gestured to the shiny silver envelope on his desk. Open it. Here? Yes, Watts. Here. I grabbed a chair, sat down, and picked up the envelope. Somehow it didn't feel heavy or thick enough to contain legal documents. Before opening, I held it close to my ear and gave it a quick shake, trying to guess what it might contain. Then, I took a deep breath, tore the strip from the top, and took a tentative peek inside. At first I couldn't see anything, but then I spotted a small square ivory envelope and extracted it. This envelope's back flap was blind embossed with the initials LHR, and on the front was written my full name, Morian Watts, in exquisite Declaration of Independence style cursive. What the absolute? It looks like an invitation, I mumbled more to myself than Chester. I ran my fingers over the embossed initials on the back. LHR. What's that mean? Now it was Chester's turn to gawk at me as if I was insane. Lillian Haynes Ruby, he replied. I nearly pooped my pants. No way was the founder and CEO of one of the most valuable companies on earth sending me personal messages. Chester, I swear, if this is all an elaborate prank. Apparently Chester overheard my thoughts because the next thing he said was, No, Watts, I assure you, it's not a prank. It's all too real. Do you have a letter opener? I'd hate to have to rip this open. The paper's so nice. Chester scoffed. Letter opener? Are you kidding me, Watts? What century do you think we're living in? He reached into his pocket and tossed a Swiss Army knife on the desk. I took the knife and carefully slit the envelope open. There was an engraved formal invitation inside. It seemed Dr. Ruby, or at least his company, was inviting me to a private seminar. Ruby Biotech International, the invitation read, warmly invites you to an exclusive private seminar hosted by our founder, Dr. Lillian Ruby. Topic: Multiplanial illness, conspiracy theory, or our dangerous new reality. Location: Abram Ruby Memorial Lecture Hall, Ruby Biotech Headquarters, Crescent Dome, USA. Refreshments and meet and greet to follow. So, Chester thought to me, what does it say? Seems I've been invited to a private seminar, I replied aloud. What's this seminar about? Asked Chester. Multiplanial illness. Speak English, please, Chester huffed. What the hell is that? I think it's supposed to be an illness caused by a mix of traditional biological or near biological pathogens with elements from beyond the veil. So it's like if you catch a flu, but that flu is actually a combination of the flu virus and a hungry ghost. Has such a thing ever happened? Chester asked. And what would you know about it? I'm not sure, I replied, and I was telling the truth. As for what I might know about it if it did happen, do you remember that exorcism I briefly mentioned during my interview? He nodded, vaguely. The client had an especially aggressive leukemia interlaced with several hungry ghosts. In order to cure the leukemia, I had to banish the ghosts. How would Dr. Ruby even know about that case? Didn't you say the client made you sign an NDA? I shrugged. I don't know, but I suspect there have been similar cases since. Maybe even enough to spark a biomedical company's interest. Still, Chester mused, it's odd for Ruby to host a seminar about that topic. He's notoriously skeptical about that sort of thing. Obviously, something's happened that's piqued his interest. When is this fancy schmancy seminar anyway? 2 weeks from now. There's a black box email to RSVP. Well, Watts, said Chester, yawning, send them an email to let them know you're coming. I immediately objected. What? I haven't even decided if I want to go yet. Well, I'm the boss, and I've decided you're going. I mean, consider the potential clients that could be in attendance. The kind with credits to burn. I rolled my eyes. Figures. Chester was always on the lookout for business opportunities. Oh, please. Do you actually think I'll find potential clients in a room full of scientists? Who said everyone at the seminar is going to be a scientist? Argued Chester. They invited you, didn't they? Well, I had to admit he had a point. Hey, Chester said, pointing his index finger in my general direction. Turn the invite over. There's something written on the back. Sure enough, there was. On the flip side of the invitation, written in the same fancy script as my name, was the following. So you're the best ghost charmer in the 10 zones, the woman who throws thunderbolts. I very much look forward to meeting you. Yours, L. Christ almighty. Dr. Ruby knew all about that exorcism, because after that client recovered from her illness, she'd sent me a drawing of me throwing thunderbolts, and no one knew about that drawing except me, or so I thought. I could feel a panic attack coming on. I dropped the invitation on the floor. Watts, Chester exclaimed. What's wrong? You look positively spooked. I tried to catch my breath. Turns out Dr. Ruby knows all about that exorcism I did, I eventually replied. Finally, said Chester, this is all beginning to make sense. After that, Chester sent me back to my desk and Claire immediately ran back to check on me. So baby girl, she thought to me, are you in trouble? Depends on how you define trouble, I said aloud. What was in the courier's envelope? She asked. If I show you, do you promise to keep a straight face? She shrugged. Sure. I pulled the invitation from my pocket and handed it to her. Ooh, she cooed. Fancy schmancy. Then, I never knew Annette was your middle name. Go ahead, I said. Look inside. She took out the invitation to the seminar and read it several times to make sure it said what she thought it said. Holy shit, girl. Are you going? Chester says it's mandatory, I grumpily replied. He even gave me a few paid days off to prepare. Turn the invite over and read the back. Holy shit! Claire swore again. Then she thought to me, that's really Lillian Ruby's handwriting. I guess so, I replied aloud. Girl, I don't know whether to hug you or what. Let's go with or what, I quipped. Claire hugged me anyway. Congratulations, she thought to me. This could be the start of something big. It's certainly the start of something, I thought back. Claire returned to her desk and I opened my email to begin my day in earnest. Only then did I remember Miss Etta's flash drive of untraceables burning a hole in my breast pocket. I never did plug it into my phone to see how much it was worth, so I slipped it in on the sly and nearly had my second panic attack of the morning. That drive contained more credits than I usually made in a year. What the hell was happening? A mere 2 weeks earlier, I'd just been a lowly haint chaser, banishing random entities, minding my own business. Now I was attending a hoity-toity seminar and being paid a crap ton of untraceables to save some baron's niece. Wonders never cease.
Professional audiobooks in a click. Spoken.